Okay, good afternoon once again. Let's try this one more time. I'll start from the top. So if you've heard this all before, just give me a nod. We were definitely noticing Mr. Pink Floyd there in the middle. Nice T-shirt, by the way. That's right. 2 thumbs up. Okay. Well, welcome to our discussion this morning. We're going to introduce you to our amazing school, Vancouver Film School, out here in the beautiful West Coast. My name is Colin Giles. I am the creative director of animation here at the school, and I've been an animator and director for over 20 years now, working on multiple different productions across many different mediums and genres. I worked on video games and television feature films. This past year I completed some 2D animation for Seth Rogen's Sausage Party. You shouldn't have seen it because you're in high school. Anyways, what I'd like to do this morning is talk a little bit about our animation programs. So we have 3 animation programs here at Vancouver Film School: classical animation, 3D animation and visual effects, and animation concept art. And they're all very different, and they all offer very different experiences, and they all prepare you for very different things. But they do share some very common ideas across each of those programs. The main one being, of course, storytelling. This is a big passion of us and our students and of people who are interested in getting into this industry, is a passion for storytelling and sharing ideas. So what I'm going to do this morning here is kind of break it down. I'm also going to show you some student films and some examples of student work. I'll talk a little bit about some of the jobs that are possible and a little bit of our philosophy of how we train students for an exciting career in the entertainment industry. So I'm going to introduce you first of all to what's the most pragmatic way of looking at this, which is the tools. And most people assume that this is the most important thing, or that this is what they're really going to be learning when they come to a school like ours, which is only partially truthful. What you're seeing here, of course, is a green screen, and you're seeing traditional animation on paper, you're seeing computer animation, and you're seeing our performance capture unit as well. These are all tools. They're all interesting in their own way. They all have their own pros and cons. They all have their perfect uses, but really they all again have a very common denominator, which is, what are we going to do with these tools? What kind of stories can we tell? And for the most part, especially now and moving into the future, they're all starting to blend together and becoming a bit of a hybrid. So we can use all of these tools together. But for us, it's kind of the least important part of the process. So when you're looking at using these tools and training yourself on these tools, you're also looking at probably thinking about working in the industry. So maybe you're thinking of working in a film studio or a television studio, maybe a game studio, or also maybe advertising, and of course the world of freelance. So perhaps it can span many different areas. There's even animation being done in the medical field, in architecture, and engineering. So it's a growing field, and there's many different possibilities and many different uses for that, which of course brings us to what's burning maybe in your mind, is what kind of jobs are there out there? Now what's interesting is it's almost 2018. Most high school students such as yourselves are quite savvy with what you need to do to get in this industry, or even what the industry looks like behind the scenes. You might have a good amount of information about that. Now most of you, I'm assuming, have sat through a Marvel movie or a big tentpole movie, and you sit through the end credits because you're waiting for that little tag at the end, and it takes a long time to get there. And what you're waiting for is the thousands of people that have worked on these films, or games for that matter. And what you're looking at is many hundreds of different departments with many thousands of different people that have worked on these films across many different technologies and many different skills. So what you're seeing in front of you right now is a list of just an example of some of the jobs that need to be done to complete these amazing sort of films or television shows or games. So you're looking at designers, storyboard artists, concept artists, all the way down to art director. These are jobs that exist in the art department, or in our case, we teach that in our animation and concept art program. So you're really looking at people who can draw and paint, design really neat creatures or characters, vehicles and props, design backgrounds, and do a lot of world building, a lot of visual development. Then you'll see prop modeler, technical directors, all the way down to surfacing artists. What you're looking at here now is people that create assets, people that are putting together sort of CG elements or even 2D elements that are going to be used in production, working off the designs of the art department. That moves into animation. It moves into the technical side of things, where we're doing maybe crowd simulations or explosions or whatever it might be. These jobs are highly technical, but also are building off of the artistic merits of what's happened before. And then you're going down into the final part of the pipeline, as we call it, which is lighting, compositing, maybe editors, production managers, effects type stuff. This is what we call post-production. So these last three sort of departments fall under our 3D animation and visual effects program. This can also be mirrored in 2D, so that would be our classical animation program. There's never been more 2D animation being done than there is right now, mostly in television and mobile. But what we're looking at here is what we call our pipeline. This is a production pipeline. Everything happens in an order. It doesn't happen in a neat and tidy order, but everyone has a part to play, and everyone shares across departments information and skills. So at the school, what we like to do is have our students work in groups and in collaborative efforts. And what they're doing is they're working on really what could be the four most important sort of pillars of learning in order to prepare yourself for a career in animation or in games or in television. And that is critical thinking, research, craft, and story. Story being the most important and probably the most obvious, but everything we do is driven by story. And what we're trying to do when we're creating our stories is we're actually trying to solve problems. That's why it takes maybe up to 4 years, 5 years to make an animated film. That's why games are in development for a long time. That's why television shows sometimes change and they maneuver and they spend a long time trying to solve the problems of what the audience needs to know in the story. So that is called critical thinking. It's really important for students to learn. The only way you can really solve a problem is to do your research. Research is one of the most important things you can do to start out, and it's a constant thing. If you're making a Finding Nemo type movie, you need to go scuba diving. You need to know what it looks like underwater. If you're making movies with creatures, you need to study animals. So you need to inform yourself and then apply that information into your art. And of course, the last one then, craft, is essentially the base set of skill sets or the tools that you need to learn in order to accomplish all of that. So these four pillars are what we design all of our classes around. Every class has some area of focus on this, and it's really important because these are the things that are not only going to get you a first job, but they're going to carry you through to your last job. It's really about preparing you for a career. So what I'd like to do is show you some examples of what our students accomplish in 1 year. And I'm going to break it down into our 3 programs. The first one being classical animation. And I'm going to show you an award-winning film that was completed last year by Nana Matluk. And this is a really cool film. It was all done in traditional animation with the assistance of some flash and harmony in terms of the technology used. But this is a film called Fears, so please enjoy this classical animation example. animators, what's really neat about our animation programs here is we also have an in-house editor and an in-studio sound designer. So all the sound and editing you see is being done in association with a professional, which is really adds to the experience and obviously to the production value of these films. The second example is from our 3D animation and visual effects program, and this example is going to kind of encompass everything that we do in the program. It's got modeling and lighting and animation. This is a film by Jason Polson called Starfish, and this student came in and really wanted to make a film and has produced all the assets for this, created them all, designed them all, did all the technical work on it, did most of the post work with the assistance of some other students. But we really enjoy this film and hope you do too. This is a pretty funny one. So that was Starfish. A really great experience working with Jason on that. The third and final example I want to show you is some example of some of the amazing visual development work that has been done out of our animation concept art program. It's a little tricky to show you work because these students don't actually make films, they make portfolios. They're putting together examples of creature design, character design, vehicles and props, perhaps building design, interiors and exteriors, color scripts, key art. They're doing just a wide array of really neat art, all production-based work for video games, perhaps for film or television, but also illustration like comic books or graphic novels. So this is animation concept art. This is actually a video that we show them on their first day of school, so there's a little bit of advice in here for you too. But what's involved in this is every single piece of art that you're going to see is something that one of our animation concept art students actually produced in their year at VFS.
This is not a competition. We're not playing a sport. This is life. It's not a game.
A concept artist, to me, is continually challenged by assignments that are inspiring, but sometimes daunting.
You're the only person that can determine what is and what isn't, you know. And you're responsible for every frame you create. That's what Muhammad Ali used to say, is I'm not going to be who you want me to be, I'm going to be who I want to be.
The foundation of what you need as a concept artist is to make beautiful images. But more importantly, even if you throw all of the pretty art aside, solving the problem is number one.
This is the connection I believe we have to have to the art form. If we're just there to like shoot, make some money and go home, then whatever. I don't have nothing to tell you. You know what I mean? Because I don't even know it. I don't know what that's like.
And this is a hard job. It's a job. It's not just, like, oh, I like to draw and I can be a concept artist. It is not that at all. Half the day is filled with like sheer stress of like, I can't get this idea down on the paper. I cannot execute it properly, or I can't find that idea.
If you want to get paid for this, you're bringing your bringing everything you have to offer to the table, but you're working in a team.
That's why you always have to, if you really love what you're doing, you have to be prepared to give it all, in spite of all the obstacles. Yep.
Has something to say. He does not paint men, landscapes, or furniture, but an idea.
Okay, that was animation concept art, and again, all the art you saw in that little short video was produced by students in our program. That is a really brief look at all three of the programs here at Vancouver Film School. I'll take some questions after the next presentation as well, if you have some. There's never really been a better time to be in this industry or going into this industry, especially in Canada. We play such a huge role in production and development of themed entertainment, whatever it might be, whether it's video games, film, or TV, of course. And we like to think we play a massive part in the growth and development of that as well. So you are in a great position in the high school you're at to be able to learn some of this, to be exposed to some of this. And like I said, I've been doing it for 20 years. I've never worked a day in my life. I love what I do. I love being able to get paid to make cartoons. It's a lot of fun. And I've been able to have some amazing experiences doing it. So I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to turn it over at this moment to Christopher Mitchell, who's going to walk you through some more information about our game design program. So you might just have to give us a couple minutes while we switch slideshows. But I'll see you on the other side of the screen in a second.
Everybody sees my little Vancouver Film School slate there at the start. Give me a wave or a thumbs up or something if you hear me okay. I see waves, that's better, okay. The delay makes that super weird. Hope we're all okay with that. Now anyways, so good morning, good afternoon everybody. Thanks for joining us here. First of all, that's me on that opening slide there. I'm Christopher Mitchell. I've been a game designer for a long, long time. A long time before that, however, I was supposed to be a lawyer. That was the career path that my family had sort of envisioned for me. Some of you might be getting a bit of that yourself. And right at the last moment, I felt that was a terrible, terrible thing, so I changed my mind and wound up in game design. I teach here full time. I've taught here for a while now, but I'm still in games, which is actually very common amongst our staff. Lots of our staff is still sort of keeping a toe in games in some fashion or the other. In fact, I know, because I just checked, 10 million people played games I worked on just last year. And it's a point that I like to sort of share with students here, in that I had this sort of life laid out for me, and it all made perfect sense on paper, but I decided I need a life in the creative arts instead. So I pivoted, and I wound up where I really needed to be. I wound up in games. About 6 years ago, however, my wife and I had a child, and she asked me to get a nice 9-to-5 job instead of game industry craziness, crazy travel, so I came to Vancouver Film School instead. And I love being here, I truly, truly do. I love working with the next wave of game developers. And luckily, as sort of a side effect of my job, I get to even go to lots of cool conferences and do cool travel. Like that picture there, that's me in Las Vegas at the CES show, the big electronics show that happens there, where I had to give a lecture to all these luminaries in the industry, including the guys who built the world's first wireless router. So that was super intimidating. You're very intimidating too, so don't worry about that. Now, I'm here specifically to talk about the game design and then programming departments here, and especially about the kind of ongoing relationship that VFS has with game companies and then software companies more generally around Vancouver and then internationally. Our program is always evolving, and it's always kind of changing and doing everything it can to use the latest technology. A nice example of that is, here's my colleague Peter Walsh kind of swimming in VR headsets that we've got courtesy of a cool partnership with AMD and then some other technology companies here. And the way we put our classes together here is essentially the same as the other departments do at VFS, in the sense that it's meant to be entirely reflective of industry demands. Like, we literally talk with local technology companies and say, okay, what do you need in your employees? We'll say, okay, what does it take to be a programmer at this company? We'll make sure that people learn those skills. So too for being a game designer or an artist in the game industry. We figure out what those courses are supposed to be, and then we push them out through our advisory board. And our advisory board is this huge collection of sort of luminaries in the game industry. So creative director of Blizzard, creative director at BioWare, this sort of thing. And it's an ongoing process that we work through over and over and over and over again, which means that our curriculum is always changing year by year, but always to increase your chances of getting that dream job, that perfect experience in the industry. And then we sort of sprinkle some special sauce on top of that, I suppose, courtesy of industry guests that we bring in to visit you guys. So that guy at the left doing the funny face that's Nels Anderson, who's the lead designer on Mark of the Ninja and Firewatch. He's now working on other cool games like that. And then bottom right, that's Dennis Ditweiler, who's one of the co-founders of Wizards of the Coast. He was one of the original artists on Magic the Gathering. So we bring people like this in to talk with students and give career advice and help mentor them. We've got some visitors from Rovio there, bottom left. And it's a great way to ensure that students kind of build this remarkable network of contacts before they even graduate. And then when they graduate, of course, they go out into Vancouver specifically, Canada generally, or internationally after the fact. Vancouver right now is just a fantastic place to work and be in technology or be in game design right now. There's so many companies, there's so many employees, so many people needed, and then this huge, huge, huge startup culture as well. It's a nice place to be, in fact, because you can work at one game company, decide that you want to pivot your career, work at a film company afterwards, and then pivot your career again and wind up in maybe true 3D animation and then go back in games again. I have many friends that have done exactly this process. I've done it myself. And we've got quite a lot of large technology companies that have moved to Vancouver. I was at the Google conference recently, and one of Google's big takeaways from the conference was that they had to set up a big office in Vancouver. They absolutely had to. So I'm waiting for that to happen, and as soon as it does, I'll happily send them programming graduates. And then we've also got this really cool startup culture in Vancouver, which I like, and I've actually worked with a bit too. Where small companies found, and then they're incubated and mentored, and then over time they grow to just ludicrous extents. Like you can see Slack's a local company that's now worth almost $3 billion, which is just absurd. Now, specifically my grads, when they graduate, because I help run the game design program and programming departments here, they often wind up at game studios. That's why most people come here. That's why I entered game design after all. And I want to just give you a sense of the different companies that people can wind up at. Lots of our students, of course, wind up at Electronic Arts. They're the big, 500-pound gorilla of game design, so you have to talk about them. And just at their Burnaby studio, they employ 1,300 people just producing games year by year. Like, it's an absurd number of people. And of course, lots and lots and lots of VFS grads. Like, I encourage people to do their own research. Look at LinkedIn, just look for Vancouver Film School and Electronic Arts, and just look at the page after page after page of results there. And something that happens, which I like and encourage, is the way that our graduates kind of take over the companies that they wind up at. VFS graduates get promoted, they then hire future VFS graduates in. The alumni network has just fantastic value for the people who come here. But maybe you're not into sports games. Maybe you're more a hit zombies with baseball bats kind of person, in which case you should be trying to get a job at Capcom. It's a very different company from EA, very different technology, but they employ lots of our grads, I have to say. Or maybe you're more interested in a place like Sega Relic. Sega Relic is a good example of the kind of special relationships that VFS has with local companies, in that they take 3 of our students every year as paid interns, and then they actually expend quite a lot of effort on giving them sort of special mentoring and training and helping them grow into just fantastic game developers. Luckily, you don't have to take my word for it. I've got a quote from Sega about that. "We're so lucky to have the Vancouver Film School in our own backyard. I've had the pleasure of working with many graduates of the game design program, and their incredible contributions to our games and our studio culture can't be overstated. I'm not sure what VFS is putting in the water, but whatever it is, I sure hope they keep doing it," which is pretty nice of them to say. Or very different company as well. We've got the Coalition in town. They're a Microsoft-owned studio that makes Gears of War. Like, they make the flagship product here. And this is the game that literally comes bundled with an Xbox One right now, and they make it right here in Vancouver. I did a quick count online, in fact, before giving this talk today, and I've got 27 former students at the Coalition right now working on this game. Or mobile games. You got to talk about mobile games, of course, if you're into game design, because the mobile market is so huge. Kabam is a fantastic, fantastic company. They make some really remarkable games. They had 80 million downloads last year, and they do all kinds of cool stuff for their employees to thank them for that. For example, they took the whole company to Las Vegas a little while ago. So they literally spent a week in Las Vegas just being happy, which is a pretty good result if you work at a company. And again, you don't take my word for it, you can take Kabam's word for it. So Vancouver Film School generates some of the best graduates in the world right now. Some of the most brilliant, dedicated systems designers I've ever worked with have emerged from this program. We're always interested in visiting with new VFS grads and are consistently impressed with their passion and drive to grow as game makers. VFS is a terrific program, and that's from the CEO of Kabam. Kabam actually did a head count a little while ago, and they realized that 1/4 of their employees, and they're a big company, are VFS grads. I stopped by a while ago and I took a picture of them. And you can see that that's a lot of people now just essentially running that company. And we've got lead designers in that lineup, we've got lead artists there, we've got programmers, we've got designers, live ops people, all sorts of folks. And if you're wondering what life in the game industry is like, it's a challenging life, but it's really exciting, and it's genuinely difficult from what most grown-ups call work. Here you can see inside Kabam. I mean, they have their meetings inside TARDISes, they bring their dogs to work, they've got giant robots and pirate gear and all sorts of craziness. I would much rather do that than be a dentist, for example. This is a video game company that has a bulk foods aisle, for goodness sake. Like, that's genuinely ridiculous of them. But let's say, okay, you don't want to work in Vancouver, that's fine. I'm a little sad, but that's okay. Maybe you want to work nationally. Well, in that case, you're probably going to Ubisoft, you're probably going to BioWare, companies like that. And again, you'll find our grads working on these games. Mass Effect 1 and 2, for example, were essentially written by a VFS grad. Their narrative designer and narrative director was a graduate of the program. Or maybe you're interested in the big international games. Maybe you're interested in League of Legends or The Witcher or whatnot. And again, you find VFS grads working on these games, which I'm always just immensely proud of. Now, I think the sort of secret sauce of our model here at VFS is that we're very much project-based. This isn't like going to a traditional university where you have to do 4 English credits. You only do things and make things that have to do with your future career. And then those final projects get extensively mentored and shaped along the way. You get quite a lot of feedback from people literally working in the game industry as well as instructors here. And I'm going to talk about one of these final projects right now, a game called Pulse. Pulse was a really interesting game. It's one of my favorites. It was produced here in, let's see, I think 4 years ago now. And there's endless cool games I could have shown you. I just picked this one because it's really different. It's a game that's all about being blind. It's a game that's all about echolocation and the sort of persistent visual hallucinations that some sight-impaired people have as they see the world around them. It's a really different game, but I like it for its difference. And the game won Unity Student Game of the Year, so the students all got to go to Amsterdam to pick up their prize. They then did a successful Kickstarter campaign, and then they eventually did a full Steam release of the game. Obviously, all the students work in the game industry. And in fact, right now I'm going to play you just a little trailer of the game here, and you can see the sort of, you know, I'll be frank, different game they made, but I think it's a really, really interesting game. And it's respected here. I think it's very, very important. I'm just going to show you some students real quick. I'm cheating, of course. I'm, cherry picking some of my favorites over the years here, but it's my lecture. That's my choice. And top left there, I've got Christine. Christine originally thought she was going to go into early childhood education, and then, like me, she sort of realized that no, she should be in games. She should be a game designer. So she came here, and now she is a game designer in Vancouver. She works at quite a large company now, and I think her career is doing fantastic. Or below her, I've got Lala. Lala is an artist, always was an artist, always will be an artist. She was a phenomenal talent when she came here, and she worked incredibly hard here, as all students do. And now she's an art director of a large company in San Francisco. Our top right, we've got Hirad. Hirad's life is soccer. That's literally all he cares about. He just lives and breathes soccer. So he came here with the dream of getting himself on the FIFA team in town. So he did that. He got, at first, just a classic junior position on that team. He worked hard and eventually became a senior line producer on the FIFA team. And then below him, we've got Pedro. Pedro had never programmed in his life before he came to Vancouver Film School, and he's now a lead programmer at Kabam. He's one of the people who got to go to Las Vegas. And then most recently, we've got Carmine here. Carmine was fresh out of high school when he came here, but he worked incredibly hard. He put together a really cool game called Unincredible along with 5 other students. And he was actually hired before he graduated to go work at Next Level Games as an associate producer on an unannounced Nintendo title. So he's literally working on a Nintendo game. I think that's just remarkable. And you see those stories all over the place. You look at companies both nationally and internationally, and time after time after time, you just find our students. Okay, so what I hope everybody remembers is that we've got this huge alumni network now, both nationally and internationally, and that network is sort of encouraging itself to grow. VFS grads know what to expect, and they know what to expect of future grads as well. We've got a very close relationship with industry and VFS. Like, we literally ask them, like, what's the position that you want created? What's the person that you want for that position? And then we help create that. It's a very, very challenging program. I'll never lie to you about that. It's very, very challenging, but it's deeply, deeply successful. That's why people come here. It's an ever-evolving program that reflects exactly what the industry needs. You will never suddenly have to do a French credit at VFS. Don't worry about that. This is all about whatever your passion is. And it leads you into the best and coolest jobs in the world, right? You could be anything, but you may as well be something that you love. If you don't mind a little bit of life advice here, in life there's work and there's play, and what you want to do is you want to architect your life in such a way that you are paid to play, whatever play happens to mean for you. Play for me is making video games, play for Colin is making films, making great 3D animations, making cartoons, and whatever it is for you, I hope you find it, I hope you pursue that passion. Okay, thanks very much.
Hi everyone. So we're actually going to assemble in a line of 4 here, and we're here to answer some questions for you in a few minutes. My name is Anthony. I work in education administration here at VFS. I want to start things off just by talking a little bit about the scholarships that we actually are offering to Osgoode Township, and we talk at VFS a lot about ideal students, and when Colin and Christopher talk about the connections that we have to industry and how we very much set our graduates up for success in those respective industries, we also need to make sure that we're doing the right things while we're here at the school, while you are here at the school, but also we want to make sure that we're getting the right students into the programs, and students at your age that are demonstrating an interest and a passion and a motivation to actually get involved in game design or animation or what have you. And with that in mind, we really want to find who those most motivated students are. And your faculty, teachers like Mark, are very important in this regard, and are quite important in terms of selecting potential candidates for the scholarships that we're going to be offering you. So I just want to announce what those scholarships are. We have 2 Excellence in Media scholarships that we're going to be offering to Osgoode. And those are basically in a tuition reduction amount of between $3,000 and $4,000. We also are offering 2 Women in Tech scholarships, and those are between $3,500 and $5,000 in tuition reductions. And we are also offering 2 programming scholarships. That's 2 programming scholarships, and those are a total of $10,000 in tuition reductions. For both of those, for anyone that's interested in programming for games. So again, what we want to see in students is that level of interest and that passion and that motivation already expressed in your coursework, and all you need to do is get in touch with VFS, apply for the program of choice, let Mark know that you're interested in the scholarship, and it is through the interactions between Mark and admissions and education administration here at the school that we will find and select the candidates that we feel are the most deserving for these scholarships. So please express your interests, come out and talk to us, talk to an admissions advisor, and we're happy to give you as much information as you need about the program. We're going to go next to one of those admissions advisors, and that's Ryan Jarman.
Thank you, Anthony. Hello, Osgoode. Good to talk to you guys. I was out there, I guess, about a little over a year. I did a presentation with Michael Baser out in your library. And yeah, first of all, you guys got a fantastic program, so you should be really grateful for what Mark's put together, because it is impressive. You guys are dealing with some media that I'm not seeing in a lot of schools, so there's huge opportunities for you guys. So it's exciting to partner with you. My name is, as Anthony says, Ryan Jarman. I'm a representative of the missions department at the school, so I work here as an advisor. So just to quickly, because I want to get to Q&A as quickly as possible, tell you what I do is I help students basically start the journey of going to VFS. So it's a few parts. First part is talking to an advisor at the school, most likely myself, so get your information from Mark, my information from Mark, so we can connect. And it's basically just an initial conversation to make sure that the school is a good fit for what you want to do. And if it is a good fit, kind of figure out which program is a good fit. Like, you might want to get into the game industry, but that could involve game design. It could be the programming course. It could be one of the animation programs. It could be sound design. It's important to really chat, figure out where your passions lie, make sure we're getting you in the right program. If it is a good fit, we find the right program, then we move on to the application, start talking about how to put the application together. One thing that I know a lot of students are concerned about is portfolio. So start going back and forth on getting that portfolio together, because it is very different from program to program, what we're looking to get from you. Go over references, all that. So once we get the application together, we submit it to the department, get it reviewed. Hopefully it's good news, and then you're still stuck with me. But we're going to help you with things like housing, with getting out to Vancouver, because it is a huge, huge move. And you're involved. Most likely your parents are involved, because you're probably going to want to get them on the phone. So basically what I want to say is you've got a ton of support here when it comes to starting this journey, and we should be talking right away. So yeah, connect with me if you have any interest in coming to VFS, or you're just curious about figuring out if it is the best school for you. Reach out and we'll chat for sure. But yeah, I think we should start answering your guys' questions, because hopefully you got a lot of them. Your teacher said you're going to fail this class if you don't ask us questions, so pressure's on. I know Pink Floyd shirt's got a good question. I can tell.
Programs. I'm going to try to do the same thing this year. So, and Jake was the only student who ended up going, but after he went there, I think he saw really what the deal was, and you should do that experience. It's pretty easy to go to the Algonquin and all the way to do those visits. You should start in grade 11. I know a lot of students actually start in grade 12, but I'm encouraging you to go early. And one of the things we did with Vancouver School is we cut the tuition of those programs in half to help you afford it. Okay, so that way, we realize it's expensive to fly out there, but since you're paying half of what anybody else over there would pay, it almost balances itself out. Another thing that we had worked out last year, which we're going to work out again this year, is really cheap room and board for that course this summer. So that's something to think about. The second thing that we're also working on this year is, and this is not finalized yet, but we are looking at getting a few other instructors to come for a 2-day seminar, and I'll probably open it up to other schools where they're going to teach you guys hands-on and right with their instructors. You get a sense of what they are doing. Okay, and the other thing that I think you probably realized, because he was talking about in the game program, it's all project-based. In case you haven't noticed, that's exactly how I run my content. I don't give you all this irrelevant theory. What's the project? How do you get into it? How do you finish that kind of that piece? Okay, so I just wanted to keep that in the back of your mind. Yeah, they can see you, by the way. So I do want to, I guess, reach out to you now and say, okay, I've been really thinking about this for a couple weeks. What are some questions that you have, either for animation, game design, or any of the other programs that we looked at, like makeup design, et cetera, et cetera? A lot of you had the chance to look into those and try to figure out if that could be for you. Who wants to ask the first question? Okay, Lucien.
Just general question.
Can you hear Lucien fairly well?
Just a general question. What are luminaries? Like,
you mentioned the word luminary.
I think I'll take that one. So what are luminaries? Okay, so shall we call them the bright lights of the particular industry we're talking about here? So Dennis Dittweiler is one of those, I would say. Like, he's an old friend of mine, but he's hugely influential in the game industry itself, like a founder of a major game company. He's got tens of thousands of people that, listen to every bit of design wisdom he says. So obviously I take his opinions very seriously. I take them into consideration when we sort of shape our programs here. That's essentially what I meant by luminaries.
thanks.
Okay,
All
next
right,
question.
nodding, so I guess I answered the question.
All right, come on, Jake. I'm coming closer to the mic to ask a question. Go ahead.
I'll just kind of kneel down. So I've talked with Colin and Ryan before, but this question's actually about the kind of working conditions in the game industry, because I've heard a lot about there being constant crunch time, as they call it, where you work for overtime for many months at a time. So I'm just kind of worried about that, because I don't know if I want to work 12 hours a day for months on end. So can you
good question.
kind of address that?
I've done long hours in the game industry myself, but personally I only do it in sort of short bursts before critical junctions of the project, and I always make sure I'm reimbursed for those efforts after the fact, either in cash or time off in lieu, that kind of things. And I do think that one of the best ways to sort of resist doing excessive overtime in any creative industry is just being very, very rigorous in your time tracking and then just pushing back where appropriate. Like, people who let themselves be crunched are crunched, has been my experience, sadly. So if somebody asked me to do, too much overtime, I would usually push back on that. And I would just say, well, you're the project manager and we're late, and I worked very, very hard to this point, so I don't really see how us being late is my problem. This seems like your problem. And okay, yes, I've gotten in big arguments with people over exactly that kind of thing, but I had a normal life after the fact, which I was very, very proud of. So I'll be honest, as I said before, all creative industries do have crunch at sort of critical points, but in a well-managed studio, it is a manageable thing, and you live, frankly, a normal, enjoyable, fantastic life. And like I say, I love what I do, so me doing the occasional weekend and then being reimbursed after the fact doesn't feel like work. I was always happy to do it, right? Here too at VFS, I came in early to give this talk, but I like being a teacher, so that's totally fine with me. I hope that answers the question. So yes, it exists, but it is a manageable thing if you take the right sort of approach to dealing with the companies that you work for.
All right, I'd like to hear a couple more questions. Okay, go ahead. So what's the acceptance rate into programs if people have, I guess it's based on a portfolio, but I'll let Ryan maybe talk about that.
Okay, I just heard my own voice, and I am loud. My wife is right. Yeah, no, absolutely. The acceptance rate varies from program to program, and it's largely based on your portfolio. So there's some programs where we get, for acting, for example, we probably have a 15% acceptance rate right into the one-year program, which is more intensive, but a much higher percentage acceptance into essentials, which is a beginning program. So for students who don't have any background, like, for example, you want to get into 3D, but you don't draw at all, we do have a foundation program you can take to really just spend a year, focus on the fundamentals. I think probably for most of you guys that won't be necessary because you guys are in a media-based, art-based program. So I'd say one of the things that are important is if you are kind of worried about being accepted, putting together portfolio, things like that, is said, connect with me, send me your work. I don't decide if you get in by any stretch, but I've seen about 10 years worth of portfolios, so I can definitely give you some really strong feedback, help you put that together.
Okay, thank you. That's a good question, and we've already done this where we called Ryan and he sat with students and looked over portfolios and said, here's what you need, here's what you're doing great, or you're and they're very approachable in that sense. A lot of admissions programs in different colleges, it's just, you don't have anybody to talk to, you just send your stuff, and you're just not in, which is a typical experience with a lot of the grade 12 students are going through. I had some last year who applied to Ryerson and they got no feedback, amazing portfolio, nothing. They just, no, you're not in. Very discouraging and frustrating because you also have nobody to call, or anyways, they tried and it was not as easy as to get through to somebody. So that's something to think of. So either the programs that were discussed today or programs that we looked at, I'd like to any other questions? A lot of students interested in game design when we talked about it. Any specific questions, maybe regarding programming? They were talking about students who had not done any programming and were successful, obviously with a lot of hard work. Yes, sir.
Do we use a lot of coding?
Okay, question is, do we use a lot of coding in the programming courses? I know there's two programs. There's the mobile program, and then there's obviously the game design program. So the question is, do we need to know a lot of coding?
So I'll take that question. So unsurprisingly, in the programming department, yeah, there's quite a lot of programming there. In game design, everybody does, shall we call it a fundamental sort of amount of programming. You do at least 2 terms of work in C#. C#'s a very approachable language. It's most people's first programming language, first proper programming language. And everybody works in Engine, shall we say. They work in Unity and Unreal, the proper game engines that we teach here. Now, that said, after 2 terms, if you decide that your interests just lie elsewhere, then you simply don't take the programming stream from that point.
take, say, perhaps the art stream or level design stream or something like this, and you spend more time on things like systems design or more things like environmental art. So to a certain extent, yes, you do have to learn programming just to make sure that you can have a fair conversation with anybody on the team on any topic. But if it's not where your passion lies, then don't do it. I mean, I literally don't want you to do it, right? I want you guys to only do the things that you're excited and passionate about.
Oh, quick question to follow up on that. Pretend I'm an Osgoode student. If I was wanting to get into programming as a young high school student, what kind of program should I be learning right now? What kind of languages?
Okay, well, if you're into games, what I would do is I would download Unity today from the Unity website, and I would start doing Unity's own tutorials, which are phenomenal. Like, I've been in games for a decade and a half now, and I did all the Unity tutorials because they're genuinely that good, and I learned some stuff from them. And they're organized very well so that ranked beginners can still learn quite a lot just from those tutorials. So I'd start in C#, and then I'd do those. Now, specifically for game design, though, if you're into game design, my best advice for anybody here is go make a board game. Because board games are fantastic right now. They're very hot, actually, in the industry itself. But you sort of can't hide behind a board game. You know, if you want to do something strange or something exotic, you just immediately do it, and you can test it and see the results of your work straight away. So if you just need a good starting place, I think that's the absolute best starting place you can take.
Well, thank you, sir.
Big budget kind of unions, like once graduate, like is it oversaturated with people looking for these jobs? Are there not enough jobs open, or are there a lot of jobs to be had in these like bigger production companies?
So did you hear that, Ryan?
Oh, voice of God is gone. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the question was, maybe you guys can give me a thumbs up if this was the question, is how easy it is to get into big budget film production films. What's your name? Yeah, got a thumbs up. Excellent. So, you know, it is a challenge, and it also depends on kind of what your expectations are on that role. Like, if you expect to go to a film school and be directing the next Marvel film 2 months later, your expectations are probably a little out of whack with reality. If you plan on getting, you know, assistant camera operator roles on, like, you know, mid-sized films, working your way up, maybe even working as grips, things like that to start off with, those opportunities are there. If you are wanting to direct right away, if that's your one passion, you have to direct, you're probably going to be getting a role in something like an independent film. You're going to be going out there getting funding. So one of the things film production does is you start off by doing directing, cinematography, producing, production design, and post-production. So all 5 areas for the first half of the year. You do everything, figure out where your passions lie, and then you pick 2 areas that you want to specialize in. So if you love directing, pick directing, and then maybe pair that with something like editing or production design, where it's a little easier to get a job right away. So we know what we're doing. There's a lot of career development, and I think that's one thing that's important to point out, is at our school, in all our programs, there is career development. It's not just like, hey, here's the skills, go figure it out. There's terms where you take classes on how to put that together, how to present it to the industry, and get those first steps going.
Yeah, and I'll just add to Ryan's answer there. It's a great question. We're in a really great position here in Canada as Canadian artists, because a lot of the productions that are being done across the country rely on government support, and that comes in very varying forms. The most obvious is tax credits, and in most cases those are only available to employees that are Canadian or Canadian residents. So there's certain animation studios even in British Columbia and in Ontario that will only accept applications for employment from Canadian citizens and Canadian residents. So that puts you at a competitive advantage, and it puts our industry at a competitive advantage too. So you already have a leg up on sort of some international competition if you are indeed Canadian.
There also is an industry that we haven't mentioned here outside of the traditional film, television, animation, game design industries. There's the world of advertising, and the skill sets that you're learning in each of these programs, and to the students' question about film production, those skill sets transfer wonderfully into much of the production that you'll see even in the city of Vancouver and certainly in Ottawa when it comes to commercials. Also, online content has exploded, and so if you are interested in cinematography, if you are interested in post-production editing, those are avenues where you can actually employ those skill sets as well.
Yeah, I spent about 3 or 4 years of my career just almost exclusively working on television commercials for Starbucks and Kellogg's and working with advertising agencies, and it was a real eye-opener for me because I was always the Disney nerd, but the opportunity to work in that realm really opened up my eyes and has also now allowed me to return to that on either on an as-needed basis or just on certain projects that might catch my eye.
I just want to touch on something that you said a few times. I think it's important for the students to realize, because I think sometimes when they look at these amazing programs and what your students are creating, they probably almost feel intimidated because it's so good. But one thing that they say is that in the first 2 terms of the programs, which we looked at, is that you get to explore a lot of different types of skill sets. And they've said this several times. They want to identify what your passion is. Because if you're doing this, I think, whatever you do, I think that was also said, try to find something you're passionate, that you love, that it doesn't feel like work, that it feels like you're playing. And this program is structured around that philosophy, which is something that I think is really rare. Okay, I mean, I've got 4 university degrees. I'll tell you, not a lot of the courses that I took were catered to any of my passions. They didn't care about my passion. They just hand in that French essay, and an English essay was completely useless to me. But that's built into that program, so that's something that's worth thinking about. Any more questions? Yes, Charlotte.
How big or how known is your graphic design?
I guess she's the digital design program, which I know a few students have shown some interest in. I think that's kind of what we would call the graphic design program, if I'm not mistaken, I guess, right?
There's aspects of graphic design for sure, but it also goes into motion design, interactive design. It's really a whole suite. I think Christopher Mitchell might be able to shed some light on that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So yes, it's related to graphic design, motion design more generally, but we've actually made a change to the program where we're going to start incorporating their work into web projects and game design projects as well. So say people who become front-end designers for video games, or people who become front-end or even back-end developers on major web projects is also a possible outcome of that program. And again, the idea there is that students learn the fundamentals and then simply just do the streams that they're interested in, and only those streams, right? So people who are into game front ends would pursue exactly that as part of the digital design program.
Yes, Aaron, go ahead.
In film and TV, do you have something to offer co-op and internships for them?
So the question is, in filming and TV kind of streams, do they get to do a co-op placement of some type?
Co-op? No, so you don't do co-op during the 12 months you're here. Honestly, you don't have time for anything during the 12 months you're here. So we kind of do an opposite, where instead of sending you out to be on set and co-op and intern and do things like that while you're in the school year, we bring in mentors from the industry as teachers, as mentors, as guest speakers, and kind of shove industry down your throat as much as possible. So it's a little different effect. I think the benefit of it is, instead of us sending you out to a set and them learning you're really good at fetching coffee, they come to a set and see how good you are on your project, and managing a set, and managing a crew, or being part of a crew. So it works out incredibly well. Good question, though.
I'll add to that a bit, actually, because we do the same sort of thing in game design and programming. So twice a week, in fact, on the final projects, we have people from industry come in to mentor the final projects. So just last week, we had the lead level designer on the new Star Wars Battlefront game come in and play the student games, and offer some feedback, which was, I'm sure maybe a little rough in spots, but it's stuff they needed to hear, and then their final projects are going to be better as a result of that, and they know what to expect.
Yeah, I'll just add to mirror these guys' comments. The mentoring aspect of our programs across the board is fascinating and really important to the success of our school and the success of our students. It's the same thing in animation. We bring in multiple times a week mentors from industry. Our part-time instructors are all employees of different studios. Most of our full-time instructors are also contact. So it becomes almost like a live-work co-op every single day at the school. Very similar to what Christopher's saying. We have people that are mentoring our students at night that just wrapped on The Last Jedi, that are working on films that are coming out 2 years from now. We just had Lino DeSalvo, a graduate of ours, come on Friday. He was the head of animation on Frozen. He's directing the Playmobil movie. He came and talked to the students, gave them advice. So it's everything from those type of luminaries, as you say, to people that are in all kinds of different positions across the board. So as Ryan mentions, it is really like bringing the co-op right into your classroom, so that it's much more of a valuable scenario where you're actually applying this knowledge to projects rather than just observing, which is really what most co-ops unfortunately end up being.
Okay, and the other questions? Yes, Darius.
What do you look for in a portfolio for someone applying to cinematography?
So what would you look for in a portfolio for somebody who's applying to cinematography? Because in our program, we develop it only in the grade 12 class. So some of the students are worried they may not have a lot of breadth of experience. And, again, I'm not even from that industry. So, do a decent job, I think, maybe even a good job. But what would you say to that question, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for film production, actually, because cinematography falls as a subset of film production, we would love to see your work. Any work you do at Osgoode, save, because it can help not only with your application, but potentially for things like scholarship applications. So keep that. The main thing for us, because we're going to teach you all the technical skills, some of which might be stuff you've learned, but we're going to teach you again, and maybe in a more industry-focused way. But we need to know that you're a storyteller. Need to know you're creative. So we actually get you to pitch a film, and it can definitely be cinematography heavy in the pitch, but it's basically one-page story of a film you'd like to make, basically going into tons of spoilers, tell us everything about the movie. Second page, how you'd film it. So the film can be lighting, sound, use of color, anything you have, because we want to basically put you on the spot and say, pitch us a film, show us that you're incredibly creative, show us that you know stuff about film. So I wouldn't sweat it too much. As I said, as long as you can show us that you've done some stuff with camera, that you've done some film, really it comes down to that storytelling. And as I said, Osgoode has a great track record. I know you guys have a solid program. So yeah, work with me and we'll put something together.
And if
One of the things Ryan did say, he's very willing to
take
sit
as
down.
many hundreds of thousands of pictures as you possibly
Don't
can.
have.
And get used to the camera, because that'll be it's an extension of your eyes. And we have the same sort of process in 3D animation. We use cameras, we have cinematographers, we use the same sort of thought processes. So it's really important for you to go out there and just make stuff. Just make a film on your iPhone, take photos with the DSLR camera, whatever it is you have at your disposal, just go and make stuff.
I like that answer too. I've said this before, don't wait for me to tell you to start. If you're really already interested and passionate about film, you should be doing it on your own, I hope. Since grade 10, I've been telling you this. You don't wait for the teacher to give you permission to learn this. You should be doing this on your own. And I think those who are successful understand that very well. It's never too late to take on that philosophy and just go with it. Maybe we'll take 2 more questions or more. Let's go with Simon and then go ahead, Simon.
For the game design, if you get accepted into a gaming company, how is it decided which game you'll work on? Do you get to choose, or are you assigned a certain game?
So did you hear that question? If you got accepted into a game design company, you got a job, how do they decide what role or what game you work on? Or do you know when you apply? I guess he's kind of wondering how that process works.
Definitely apply for a role, right? So be that, say, system designer or programmer or artist, whatever the case may be. You often don't know what the game's going to be. I mean, you know what the studio's history is, and sometimes they will specifically hire you for a game. Very often, though, that's not the case. You'll just be brought into a company, and sometimes the most they'll tell you it is an upcoming game or something like this. In some rare occasions, they'll have you sign a non-disclosure agreement, and they'll talk to you about the project beforehand. But that usually doesn't happen until, say, like your second or third interview with the company, when they're just about sure that you're the right person, and then they want to say, okay, we're making this big Care Bears video game. Like, are you sure that you are the person who wants to work on this Care Bears game, right? And you know, just to make sure absolute best fits, right? But generally speaking, you train yourself for a role, and then it's a role that you enjoy, and at that point, it kind of doesn't matter what the game is. Okay.
So when's that Care Bear game coming out? Because that sounds real good.
Oh, it'll make bank.
Oh man,
I guarantee it.
I can build on that, Christopher. Yeah. Just to build on that answer, just to give you a real world example, I was working in an animation studio on some really preschool type stuff, and I was called into a meeting, and they just asked me a point blank question saying, we need you for about 2 months on a side project. Are you okay with bloody violence? My answer was, of course I am. And the project was the first God of War. So you just never know what project's going to be. I knew what the job was, and I knew what was expected of me in terms of bloody violence. And that was a big influence on my life. I love God of War.
All right, we had another question back there.
How does tuition vary depending on what you do at the school? What if you're like an editor, like how much would that be?
I have those numbers, and since I haven't taught you yet in my next semester class, I'm glad to show you. But there are different programs that have different tuitions. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that. Why some programs maybe have different tuitions than others, because we know they seem to be varying.
Comes down to production costs. Like one example would be writing for film and television, which involves basically just laptops where you write on in your room. Costs a lot less than film production to run, which involves 40,000 square feet of space for filming, huge cameras, huge lights, huge sound, tons of stuff. So that's where a lot of the production budgets come from, is your tuition. One thing I would like to add about that is part of the planning too, because you're going to see the tuition and they vary from $7,500 to $35,000, and probably be like, I can't afford this. What am I going to do? But we don't expect you to pull that out of your wallet. So it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of looking at things like payment plans, student loans, scholarships. So part of the process is making sure that you plan accordingly, because you could work out tuition, but we also want to make sure you planned out things like food and rent, because we don't want you coming to Christopher or Colin here 4 months in and be like, my class is great. Can't eat any food, and I live on the street, but I've learned a lot about games. So it's a lot of planning. It's a lot of working with me to make sure we do this right.
We got still a couple questions, but that's why we set up the scholarship program, so that these programs become attainable for some of you who are interested in going to them. Okay, that's why this has been set up, because I think a lot of students would probably not consider it. And I know one parent the other night, parent-teacher interview, told me this very specific thing. She said, I work in a studio with a lot of graphic designers, and they found out that, they have the chance to go directly into Vancouver Film School. And they're like, they just say, this is what they say, we wish we had that chance, because it just creates and opens so many more doors than you can imagine that it would. Yes, one more question.
Okay, my question is, what happens if you get in a program and you realize you don't actually like what you're doing in that program and want to take a different one?
So the question is, what happens if we get into the program and I realize a couple, I'll say 2 months down the road, maybe this is not the right program for me? What is, some universities will transfer into another program. I guess what happens then?
So obviously you want to be completely open and transparent while you're in the school. So if 2 weeks in you're having serious doubts and you feel like it isn't the career for you, don't keep it to yourself. Tell someone, and then you'll meet with educational admin, which is the department here, and kind of figure out what your options are. Ideally, obviously, we don't want half the class switching and going back and forth, but ultimately we want you on the right track. So oftentimes we work with students and make things right, and oftentimes that is figuring out, if it is a different program. But it definitely emphasizes how important it is to, I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but talk with admissions a lot before you get into the program and really have a strong idea what you're getting yourself into, so that we, as much as possible, can make sure you're going into the right program. But yeah, no, we want to make sure you're in the right path and going the right place for sure.
I want to reiterate, I said this, any of you are even if you're only grade 10, and you're interested now, we can after school, you'd have to get a ride or whatever, but we can call Ryan and you talk to him, ask him some questions, and he'll be happy, to try to help you figure out what it is maybe you're looking for. Okay, so I know he's made himself available in the past, so that's available to all of you at any point. You just say, Mr. Dubois, can I call VFS? I want to ask him about this, and I'm starting to think about it. Some of you, I told you, take some night classes in drawing, etc. Don't just base everything on what you get in school. Look for opportunities, and if the younger you are, the better that is. But having said all that, the most important piece of the puzzle is your dedication, your ability to work hard. And I know that I will tell you if I think you're not a good candidate, I'll tell you. I don't want to be mean. But I'll also tell you early on, you need to change this, you need to change that. And I do this all the time, so it's not a surprise to any of you. Okay, any other maybe last question? Because I know you need to head off to class. And a lot of amazing questions. I'm really happy about that. And again, if you come up with other questions, I can always just send them to Ryan, and he'll be glad to just answer those whatever. Is that it? All right, guys. Well, I'm going to just say a huge thank you for taking your time to speak to our students and, getting them to appreciate, your school and all the great things you're doing. And I know there's a lot of interest in your program, so you'll probably be hearing a lot more from us. And thank you again for coming out this morning for you guys. Okay, guys. Thank you. I'm going to send them off to class. Have a good one, guys. Okay. I'm going to ask my grade 12s to help me place the chairs. Okay. So we're going to roll out the tables. Can you bring the attendants and tell them if I can get a copy of that? That'd be great.